Armed men stormed the courthouse just as Elena was about to sign her divorce papers, only to discover her cheating husband had stolen millions from the Mafia. Now she and her newborn daughter are caught in a war between criminals, and the only man who can protect them is the dangerously handsome crime lord who just declared her ex-husband's death sentence. One choice will determine if she survives the next 24 hours. Stay until the end to find out if love can bloom in the darkest places. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Emempt. P. The courthouse on 5th and Madison smelled like old wood, stale coffee, and the particular kind of despair that accumulates in places where lives are legally dismantled. Elena Marquez had been sitting on the hard wooden bench outside courtroom 3B for 47 minutes, her 3-month-old daughter Sofia sleeping in the carrier strapped to her chest, when she finally admitted to herself that Adrian wasn't coming. Of course he wasn't coming. Adrian Russo didn't do things that inconvenienced him, and showing up to finalize their divorce in person would have been inconvenient. He had his lawyers for that. He had his new life for that. He had Veronica Ashford, the blonde socialite whose Instagram post showed them jet-setting to places Elena had only dreamed about when she'd been foolish enough to believe in their marriage. Mrs. Russo? The bailiff, a heavy-set man with kind eyes, stood in the doorway. Judge Morrison is ready for you. Elena rose carefully, one hand supporting Sophia's head through the carrier. Her daughter stirred but didn't wake. 3 months old, and already she'd learned to sleep through chaos. Elena wondered if that was a survival skill Sophia had inherited from her, or if it was simply what happened when your life imploded before you could even understand what stability meant. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected. She'd watched enough legal dramas to envision something grand, but this was just a functional room with fluorescent lighting and American flags flanking the judge's bench. Adrian's attorney, a silver-haired man named Douglas Kemper, who charged $600 an hour, sat at the defendant's table reviewing documents. He looked up when Elena entered, his expression professionally neutral. "Miss Marquez?" He didn't call her Mrs. Russo. The message was clear. In his eyes, the marriage was already over. "Please have a seat." Elena sat at the plaintiff's table, alone. She couldn't afford an attorney, so she'd filed the paperwork herself, spending nights at the public library printing forms while Sophia slept in her stroller. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, had helped her navigate the legal jargon, pointing out which boxes to check, which signatures were required. Judge Morrison entered through a side door and everyone stood. She was a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She settled into her chair with the weariness of someone who had presided over too many broken promises. "Please be seated." Her voice carried the flat efficiency of routine. "We're here for the dissolution of marriage between Elena Marquez and Adrian Russo. Mr. Kemper, I see your client isn't present." "Your Honor, Mr. Russo has waived his right to appear. All necessary documents have been signed and notarized." Judge Morrison's lips thinned with disapproval, but she nodded. "Very well. Ms. Marquez, you're representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "And you're certain you want to proceed with this divorce?" The question seemed almost absurd. Certain? She'd been certain the day she came home early from her shift at the diner and found Adrian's phone lighting up with messages from Veronica. She'd been certain the night he told her their marriage had been a mistake, that he'd only married her because she'd been different from the women in his social circle. And wasn't that exactly the problem? She'd been certain every day of her pregnancy when he'd refused to touch her, looking at her changing body with something close to disgust. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm certain." Judge Morrison began reviewing the documents, her pen scratching notes in the margins. Elena let her gaze drift to the windows, watching clouds move across the gray November sky. In her carrier, Sophia made a small sound, something between a sigh and a coo. Elena pressed her hand against her daughter's back, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her palm. This was supposed to be the end. Sign the papers, walk away, start building something new from the wreckage. She'd already found a cheaper apartment in a worse neighborhood. She'd already accepted that she'd be raising Sophia alone, working double shifts, surviving on 4 hours of sleep and cheap ramen. It would be hard, but it would be honest. No more pretending to fit into Adrian's world of charity galas and business dinners where everyone smiled at her with pity, thinly disguised as politeness. Your Honor, Kemper's voice interrupted her thoughts. If I may, there are a few assets that require clarification. Mr. Russo has prepared a complete inventory of marital property, and he's willing to be generous in the settlement. Generous? The word tasted like poison. Elena had seen Adrian's idea of generosity. It meant giving her just enough to feel like she owed him something, just enough to keep her from making waves. I don't want anything from him, Elena said. The papers state that clearly. No alimony, no property division. I just want this over. Kemper's eyebrows rose slightly. Ms. Marquez, I understand you're upset, but you're entitled to, I'm not upset. I'm done. She met his eyes. I don't want to be tied to him in any way. Not financially, not legally, not ever again. Judge Morrison looked at her over her reading glasses. Ms. Marquez, I appreciate your desire for a clean break, but you have a child to consider. Child support isn't about you. It's about your daughter's welfare. I can provide for my daughter. On a waitress's salary? Kemper's tone wasn't unkind, but it was pointed. Mr. Russo earns considerable income. My daughter deserves a mother who doesn't accept money from a man who abandoned us. Elena's voice rose slightly, enough to make Sophia stir. She lowered it, forcing calm. I filed for child support in the original petition, but I've changed my mind. I don't want it. The judge set down her pen. Ms. Marquez, are you certain? Because once this divorce is finalized, modifying the terms will be difficult. Elena was about to answer when the courtroom door burst open. Not opened. Burst. 4 men entered, moving with the kind of purposeful coordination that made Elena's blood go cold. They weren't law enforcement. She could tell that immediately. Law enforcement announced themselves, showed badges, explained their presence. These men simply took positions around the room like they owned it, their hands resting on weapons concealed beneath expensive suit jackets. Judge Morrison shot to her feet. What is the meaning of this? Bailiff? The bailiff had already moved toward the nearest intruder, his hand on his service weapon, but he froze when a 5th man entered the courtroom. This one was different. He moved like water, smooth and inevitable, his presence filling the room before he'd taken 3 steps. He was perhaps 40, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and eyes the color of winter storms. His suit probably cost more than Elena earned in 6 months, tailored to perfection, and he wore it with the casual confidence of someone who knew exactly how dangerous he was. Judge Morrison. His voice was quiet, almost polite, with the faintest trace of an accent Elena couldn't place. I apologize for the interruption. This won't take long. This is a closed proceeding. I'm calling security. The judge reached for her phone, but one of the armed men moved to block her, shaking his head slowly. Elena's arms tightened around Sophia, instinct screaming at her to run, even as logic told her there was nowhere to go. The 4 armed men had positioned themselves at the exits. Whatever was happening, they'd planned it carefully. Kemper had gone pale. Who are you? You can't just... I can. The man in the perfect suit turned his attention to the lawyer, and Kemper fell silent mid-sentence. My name is Lucien Moretti, and I'm here to discuss a matter of stolen property. The name meant nothing to Elena, but Kemper's reaction suggested it should have. The attorney actually stumbled backward, his hand gripping the edge of the table for support. Mr. Moretti, I assure you I have no knowledge of any... Not you. Lucien's gaze shifted, landing on Elena with an intensity that made her breath catch. Though you've been remarkably helpful, Mr. Kemper. The financial documents you filed last month gave us exactly what we needed to track down your client. I don't understand. Elena heard herself speak, even though every instinct told her to stay silent, to make herself invisible. I don't know who you are or what you want, but this is a divorce proceeding. It has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with it. Lucien moved closer, his steps measured, unthreatening, but inexorable. Tell me, Ms. Marquez, how much do you know about your husband's business? He's in real estate development, Russo Enterprises. Is that what he told you? Something that might have been amusement flickered across Lucien's face. And you believed him? Elena's mind raced. She'd never questioned Adrian's work, never thought to dig deeper. He traveled frequently, met with investors, talked about projects and profit margins. It had all seemed normal, boring even. Your Honor, I must insist you call the police. Kemper had found his voice again, though it shook. This is highly irregular. The police won't come. Lucian didn't even look at the lawyer. They've been advised this is a matter of internal business resolution. Federal authorities have been similarly advised. No one is coming to rescue anyone, mister. Kemper, so I suggest you sit down and be quiet while I explain the situation to Ms. Marquez. Judge Morrison, who had remained standing, slowly sank back into her chair. Elena recognized the look on her face. She'd seen it in the mirror often enough. It was the expression of someone realizing they had absolutely no control over what was happening. Ms. Marquez. Lucian stopped a few feet from her table, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that suggested intelligence rather than age. 6 months ago, your husband approached certain individuals in my organization with a business proposal. He had connections in city planning, access to information about upcoming development projects. He offered to provide insider intelligence in exchange for funding. That's illegal. The words came out automatically. Yes, it is. Lucian's expression didn't change. But profitable, which is all Adrian Russo cared about. We provided him with $12 million over 4 months. He provided us with information that allowed us to acquire properties before their value increased. Everyone profited. Elena's hands had gone numb. $12 million. She'd been clipping coupons while her husband played with millions. 3 weeks ago, Lucien continued, your husband stopped responding to communications. The information he provided became less reliable. Then it stopped altogether. When my associates investigated, they discovered that Adrian Russo had taken our money and used it to establish himself with a rival organization. He's been selling them information about our operations, information he only had access to because of our arrangement. He stole from you. Elena's voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. $12 million and counting, plus the value of the intelligence he sold to our enemies. Lucian tilted his head slightly. In my world, Ms. Marquez, such betrayal has consequences, severe ones. The courtroom had gone silent except for Sophia's breathing and the distant sound of traffic outside. Elena looked at Kemper, who was staring at his hands, refusing to meet her eyes. Then at Judge Morrison, who looked stricken. But, what does this have to do with me? Elena asked. I'm divorcing him. I don't want anything from him. I just want to be free of... Unfortunately, you're not free of him. Lucian's voice softened slightly, and somehow that was worse than if he'd been angry. You're his wife, the mother of his child. In the eyes of the people Adrian has betrayed, you're leverage, a weakness to exploit. The words took a moment to penetrate. When they did, Elena felt the world tilt. No. She stood up, holding Sophia against her chest. No, I have nothing to do with his business. I didn't know about any of this. I'm just trying to get away from him, to start over. I believe you. Lucien's eyes moved to Sophia, and something in his expression shifted. You didn't choose this, but you're caught in it nonetheless. Then arrest him, press charges, go to the authorities. The authorities can't protect you from the people hunting your husband, and they won't. Lucien gestured to one of his men, who produced a tablet and pulled up a series of photographs. He held it where Elena could see. The images showed carnage, bodies, blood, crime scenes that looked like war zones. This is what happens when people betray the Volkov family, Lucien said quietly. They're our primary rivals, and they're the ones your husband sold information to. When they discover he's been compromised, when they realize he's more liability than asset, they'll eliminate him, but not before they use him to send a message to others who might consider similar betrayals. Elena couldn't look away from the photographs. One showed a woman and 2 children, their bodies arranged with calculated brutality. That was Dmitry Volkov's accountant, Lucien continued. He was skimming. They killed him, his wife, and his daughters to make a point. They're not subtle, Miss Marquez. They're thorough. Stop. Elena's voice broke. Please, just stop. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you're facing. Lucien nodded, and his man took the tablet away. Adrian Russo triggered a war between 2 criminal organizations. The Volkovs will kill him when they find him. They'll kill anyone connected to him to erase his bloodline and make an example. That includes you and your daughter. The room spun. Elena sat down hard, her vision tunneling. This is insane, Judge Morrison had found her voice. You can't expect us to just sit here while you threaten. I'm not threatening anyone, Your Honor. I'm stating facts. Lucian's attention returned to Elena. Miss Marquez, I want you to understand something. I didn't come here to hurt you. I came to offer you a choice. Elena forced herself to look at him, this dangerous stranger who spoke of murder like it was a business expense. What choice? You can leave this courthouse and try to disappear. Take your daughter, change your name, run as far and as fast as you can. Maybe you'll survive. Maybe the Volkovs won't find you. Maybe you'll get lucky. He paused. I don't believe in relying on luck. And the other option? You accept my protection. You come with me now, you and your daughter, and I guarantee your safety. Elena almost laughed. It came out as something closer to a sob. Protection? From you? You're a criminal. You just admitted to everything. I'm a businessman operating in a world with different rules than you're accustomed to. Yes, I operate outside the law. Yes, I've done things that would horrify you, but I keep my word, Ms. Marquez. When I promise protection, I deliver it. Why would you protect me? What do you get out of this? Lucien's expression remained neutral. Adrian Russo owes me $12 million and significant compensation for his betrayal. Dead men can't repay debts, and I prefer to recover my investment when possible. If I keep you and your daughter safe, I maintain leverage over him. He'll do anything to ensure your safety, which means he'll work to repay what he stole. You're going to use us as hostages. I'm going to keep you alive, Lucien corrected her gently. The alternative is what I showed you in those photographs. This isn't about what's fair or right, Ms. Marquez. This is about survival. Your survival and your daughter's. Sophia chose that moment to wake up, her small face scrunching as she began to fuss. Elena automatically began the gentle bouncing motion that sometimes soothed her, her mind racing through impossible choices. Run and risk everything. Trust a criminal and risk everything. There were no good options, only degrees of terrible. If I go with you, she heard herself say, what happens? Do I become a prisoner? You become a guest in my home under protective custody. You'll have your own rooms, everything you and your daughter need. You won't be free to leave the property unescorted, but you'll be safe, comfortable, alive. For how long? Until the situation is resolved, until Adrian repays his debt, or until the threat from the Volkovs is neutralized. Lucien glanced at his watch. I need an answer, Miss Marquez. The longer we stay here, the more attention we draw. Elena looked at Judge Morrison, hoping for guidance, for wisdom, for anything. But the judge just looked back at her with helpless sympathy. This was beyond her jurisdiction, beyond anyone's ability to fix with legal procedures and proper channels. I don't even know you, Elena's voice cracked. You could be lying about all of this. You could be, you don't know me. You don't trust me. I understand. Lucien reached into his jacket slowly, carefully, and pulled out not a weapon, but a phone. He pulled up a news website and held it where she could see. The headline read, FBI investigating missing real estate developer Adrian Russo. Below it, a smaller story, bodies discovered in warehouse district linked to organized crime. And another, federal task force warns of escalating gang violence. This is happening, Lucien said quietly, whether you want to believe it or not. Adrian's disappearance has already made the news. The FBI is looking for him, which means they'll be looking for you. The Volkovs are looking for him, which means they're looking for you. Everyone wants to find Adrian Russo, and you're the most obvious place to start. Elena's arms tightened around Sophia. Her daughter had stopped fussing and was looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. 3 months old, helpless, dependent on Elena for everything. What kind of mother runs toward danger? What kind of mother trusts a man who admits to being a criminal? What kind of mother lets her baby die because she's too proud to accept help from an imperfect source? If I say yes, Elena whispered, if I go with you, I need your word, your absolute word that my daughter will be safe. You have it. Not good enough. Elena stood, moving closer to Lucien despite every instinct screaming at her to keep distance. I need you to promise me. Look me in the eye and promise me that whatever happens, my daughter will not be harmed. Lucian met her gaze, and for the first time, Elena saw something in his expression that wasn't calculated, a flicker of what might have been respect. I give you my word, Ms. Marquez. No harm will come to your daughter while she's under my protection. I will defend her with the same resources and commitment I use to defend my own interests. She will be safe. And me? You as well. Elena looked down at Sophia, whose tiny hand had wrapped around her finger with surprising strength. She thought about the apartment she'd rented, the life she'd planned, the independence she'd craved. She thought about the photographs Lucian had shown her, the bodies arranged like warnings. She thought about choice and how sometimes the only choice that matters is between bad and worse. Okay. The word came out barely above a whisper. Okay, I'll go with you. Lucian nodded once, then gestured to his men. Two of them immediately moved to the exits, checking the hallways. The others formed a protective circle around Elena. Your Honor, Lucian addressed Judge Morrison, you'll forget this conversation happened. Mr. Kemper, you'll tell your client that his wife left the courthouse without finalizing the divorce. You'll advise him to disappear if he values his life. Kemper nodded rapidly. Yes, of course, absolutely. And if either of you discusses what happened here with anyone, law enforcement, media, anyone, I'll know. Lucien's voice remained calm, but the threat was unmistakable. I'll be disappointed. You don't want to disappoint me. Judge Morrison's face had gone white, but she managed to nod. Lucian turned back to Elena. Do you have belongings? Anything you need from your apartment? I have a bag in the lobby. Diapers, bottles, changes of clothes for Sophia. That's all. We'll retrieve it. Anything else? Elena thought about the apartment, about the few possessions she'd managed to keep from her marriage, about the life she'd been planning to build from scratch. No, nothing else matters. Then we should go. The convoy out of the courthouse was surreal. Lucien's men moved with military precision, one ahead of Elena, one behind, two flanking. They descended the back stairwell instead of the main lobby, emerging into an underground parking garage where three black SUVs waited with engines running. Elena was guided into the middle vehicle. Lucian slid in beside her while two of his men took the front seats. Through the tinted windows, she watched the other SUVs fill with armed men. This is really happening, she murmured. Yes. Lucian fastened his seatbelt, then glanced at Sophia. Does she need anything? We have formula, diapers, whatever she requires. The question was so mundane, so domestic in the middle of this nightmare that Elena almost laughed. She's fine for now. I just fed her before the hearing. The convoy pulled out of the parking garage in formation, moving through downtown traffic with practiced ease. Elena watched the city slide past, wondering if she'd ever see it again as a free woman. Where are we going? She asked. My estate. It's about 40 minutes outside the city, heavily secured. You'll be safe there. Safe from the Volkovs. Safe from everyone. Lucian pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I'm mobilizing additional security, alerting my people to watch for any movement from rival organizations. The next few days will be critical. Why? Because Adrian will hear that I have you. He'll panic. Panicked men make mistakes. Lucian's smile was cold. I'm counting on it. Elena looked down at Sophia, who had fallen back asleep, oblivious to the fact that her entire world had just shifted. I need you to understand something. What's that? I don't care what Adrian owes you. I don't care about his debts or his betrayals or his business deals. Elena's voice was steady, harder than she'd known she could make it. The only thing I care about is my daughter. If you use her to hurt him, if you put her at risk to get what you want, I'll find a way to make you regret it. Lucian studied her for a long moment. Then something that might have been genuine amusement crossed his face. You just threatened a man who walked into a courthouse with armed guards and interrupted a legal proceeding. I threatened a man who promised to protect my daughter. I'm holding you to that promise. Fair enough? Lucian pocketed his phone. For what it's worth, Miss Marquez, I respect that. You should be fierce about protecting her. It means you're a good mother. How would you know anything about good mothers? I had one once. His voice quieted. She died protecting me and my sister from men not unlike the Volkovs. I was 12. I understood then that protection is the only currency that matters when everything else fails. Elena hadn't expected honesty, hadn't expected to see anything human in this man who orchestrated violence like it was a business transaction. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me valuable lessons. Lucian looked out the window as the city gave way to suburbs, then to estates set back from the road. It taught me that safety is an illusion unless you have the power to enforce it. That's what I'm offering you. Not an illusion, but actual protection backed by resources and commitment. The convoy turned onto a private drive flanked by high stone walls topped with security cameras. Gates opened automatically, revealing manicured grounds that stretched toward a mansion that looked like it belonged in a European countryside rather than outside an American city. This is your home? Elena couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. One of them. I find it's best not to stay in the same place too long. Lucian gestured toward the mansion. But it's secure, comfortable. You'll have everything you need. The SUVs pulled up to the main entrance, where more armed men waited. Elena felt like she'd stepped into a movie. Except movies didn't capture the weight of real fear, the way her hands shook as she unbuckled Sophia from the carrier. A woman emerged from the mansion, middle-aged and professional in dark slacks and a crisp white blouse. Mr. Moretti. Sophia, this is Elena Marquez and her daughter Sophia. They'll be staying with us. Please prepare the guest suite in the East Wing and make sure they have everything they need. Of course. Sophia's expression softened when she looked at Elena and the baby. Come with me, dear. Let's get you settled. Lucien touched Elena's elbow gently. Sophia runs my household. She's trustworthy and discreet. If you need anything, ask her. Elena wanted to protest, to demand more explanations, to understand exactly what she'd agreed to, but exhaustion was crashing over her like a wave, adrenaline giving way to bone-deep weariness. She followed Sophia into the mansion, aware of Lucien watching her go. The interior was stunning, marble floors, artwork that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, windows that overlooked gardens that looked professionally maintained. Sophia led her up a sweeping staircase to the second floor, down a hallway lined with closed doors. This will be your suite. Sophia opened double doors to reveal rooms that were bigger than Elena's entire apartment. A sitting area with comfortable furniture, a bedroom with a massive bed, and most importantly, a nursery already equipped with a crib, changing table, and supplies. How? Elena stared at the nursery. This is already set up. Mr. Moretti called ahead while you were en route. We had everything delivered and assembled. Sophia smiled. He's very efficient when he wants something done. Elena set down the diaper bag and carefully placed Sophia in the crib, making sure she was secure. Her daughter didn't wake, exhausted from the day's chaos. There's formula in the mini fridge, diapers in the changing table, clothes in the dresser. Sophia pointed out each item. If you need different sizes or brands, just let me know. The bathroom is through that door, fully stocked. Towels, toiletries, whatever you need. Thank you. Elena's voice was hoarse. Sophia's expression turned sympathetic. I know this must be overwhelming, but you're safe here. Mr. Moretti takes his commitments very seriously. He's a criminal. Yes. Sophia didn't flinch from the truth. But he's also a man of honor in his own way. If he promised to protect you, he will. After Sophia left, Elena sank onto the edge of the bed and let herself shake. The enormity of what had happened crashed over her. The courtroom, the armed men, the photographs of bodies. The choice that wasn't really a choice. She'd walked into that courthouse planning to start over, to build something clean and honest from the ruins of her marriage. Instead, she'd traded one prison for another. Except this prison had marble floors and armed guards, and a man who spoke of violence like poetry. This prison came with promises of protection that might be the only thing standing between her daughter and a brutal death. Elena looked at Sophia sleeping peacefully in the crib, oblivious to danger, trusting that her mother would keep her safe. She'd made the only choice she could. Now she had to live with it, whatever that meant. The first night in Lucian Moretti's mansion, Elena didn't sleep at all. She sat in the cushioned chair beside Sophia's crib, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a house that was both sanctuary and prison. Footsteps in distant hallways, the low murmur of voices speaking languages she didn't recognize. Once, around 3 in the morning, the distinct sound of a helicopter landing somewhere on the grounds, its rotors cutting through the darkness before falling silent. When dawn finally broke, painting the nursery in shades of pink and gold, Elena felt hollowed out, her mind still racing through everything that had happened in the courthouse. She kept seeing Lucian's face as he showed her those photographs, kept hearing his voice as he explained the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Sophia woke hungry and fussing, her cries cutting through Elena's exhaustion like a blade. Elena lifted her daughter from the crib, settling into the nursing chair by the window. As Sophia latched on, Elena looked out over the estate grounds. Manicured gardens, a fountain in the center courtyard, trees that must have been decades old forming a natural barrier between the mansion and the outside world. In the distance, she could see men patrolling, their weapons visible even from this height. A knock at the door made her tense. "Come in," she called, making sure the nursing blanket covered her properly. Sophia entered carrying a tray laden with breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, orange juice, and coffee that smelled like heaven. "Good morning, dear. I thought you might be hungry." "Thank you." Elena's voice was rough from lack of sleep. "You didn't have to." "Mr. Moretti's instructions. You're to have whatever you need, whenever you need it." Sophia set the tray on the small table near the window. "He also asked me to let you know he'd like to speak with you this morning once you've had a chance to eat and settle Sophia." Elena's stomach tightened. "About what?" "He didn't say. But he's not a man who wastes time with small talk." Sophia's expression softened. "Don't worry. If he wanted to harm you, you wouldn't be having breakfast in a comfortable suite. You'd already know his intentions." The reassurance was less comforting than Sophia seemed to think, but Elena nodded anyway. After Sophia left, she managed to eat half the breakfast while Sophia dozed against her shoulder. The food was excellent, which somehow made everything worse. It was easier to hate a captor who treated you badly, harder when they provided fresh fruit and perfectly cooked eggs and coffee that actually tasted like something worth drinking. She showered quickly, keeping the bathroom door open so she could hear if Sophia woke. The bathroom was stocked with expensive toiletries, thick towels, and a bathrobe softer than anything Elena had ever owned. She dressed in the same clothes she'd worn to the courthouse. They were all she had, and pulled her dark hair into a ponytail. Sophia was awake when she emerged, making the small cooing sounds that meant she was content for now. Elena changed her diaper, dressed her in a clean onesie from the supplies Sophia had mentioned, and tried to prepare herself for whatever conversation Lucian wanted to have. She found him in what Sophia called the library, though it looked more like a command center disguised as a gentleman's study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls filled with leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. The 4th wall consisted of windows overlooking the gardens. In the center of the room, Lucian sat behind a massive desk, multiple monitors displaying security feeds, financial data, and what looked like maps marked with colored pins. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. He'd changed from the immaculate suit he'd worn yesterday into dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Somehow, the casual attire made him seem more dangerous, not less. "Ms. Marquez, please sit." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Elena sat, adjusting Sophia in her arms. "It's just Elena. I think we're past formalities." "Elena, then." Lucian closed the laptop in front of him, giving her his full attention. "How did you sleep?" "I didn't." "Understandable. The first night in a new place is always difficult." He paused. "Especially when that place isn't your choice. Is this where you tell me what happens now? What the rules are?" "Partially." Lucian leaned back in his chair. "But first I need to understand something. How much do you actually know about Adrian Russo? His background, his business dealings, his connections?" Elena shifted Sophia to her other arm. "I know he came from money. Old money. The kind that comes with expectations and country club memberships. I know he went to Princeton, worked for his father's real estate company before starting his own firm. I know he was charming when we met, attentive, made me feel like I mattered." Her voice hardened. "I know he was a liar who was already involved with Veronica while he was married to me. Beyond that, apparently I don't know anything." "You met him how?" "I was waitressing at a restaurant his company used for business dinners. He came in regularly, always polite, good tipper. One night he asked me out." Elena looked down at Sophia, who was watching Lucian with wide, curious eyes. "I thought I was Cinderella. Turns out I was just naive." When did the marriage start deteriorating? Why does this matter? Because I need to understand Adrian's psychology, what he values, what motivates him, what he fears. Lucian's eyes never left her face. You were married to him. You saw him in ways his business associates never did. Elena considered refusing to answer, but what was the point? She was already here, already trapped in whatever game Lucian was playing with her ex-husband. It started deteriorating the moment I got pregnant. He didn't want children, said we weren't ready, that it would complicate things. I thought he'd come around once Sophia was born, but he just pulled further away. Did he ever discuss his work with you? No. He said I wouldn't understand the complexities, that it was boring business talk. Elena's laugh was bitter. I believed that too. I believed everything he told me because I wanted the fairy tale to be real. Lucian was quiet for a moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Adrian Russo is not a master criminal. He's a desperate man who got in over his head and made catastrophically stupid choices to try to save himself. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to help you understand what you're caught in the middle of. Lucien stood, moving to the windows. Adrian's father died 2 years ago, leaving the company to him. What Adrian didn't reveal publicly was that his father left behind significant debts, legitimate debts, from bad investments and declining property values. Adrian needed cash fast to keep the company afloat. So he turned to criminals. He turned to me. I'm a businessman who operates in gray areas, yes, but I'm not reckless. I perform due diligence. I make calculated investments. Lucien's voice carried an edge of anger now. Adrian presented himself as someone with valuable connections and information. I provided capital with the understanding that he would deliver results. He delivered for a while, long enough to earn my trust. And then he betrayed you. And then he got greedy. The Volkov family offered him more money for better information, details about my operations, my vulnerabilities, my business strategies. Lucien turned to face her. He sold me out to my enemies and took my money with him. Sophia began to fuss, and Elena automatically started the gentle bouncing that sometimes soothed her. I still don't understand what this has to do with me. I never knew about any of this. I have no information, no access to whatever Adrian was involved in. You have something more valuable than information. Lucian's gaze dropped to Sophia. You have his child, his daughter, DNA evidence of his bloodline. The words sent ice through Elena's veins. If you think I'm going to let you, I'm not going to harm her. Lucian's interruption was sharp. I gave you my word yesterday, and I meant it. But you need to understand how people like the Volkovs think. They don't just kill traitors. They erase them. Every connection, every legacy, every trace. Your daughter represents Adrian's continuation. They'll want her dead to send a message. Elena held Sophia tighter. Then why are you protecting us? If she's such a valuable target, why not just hand us over? Use us as bait. Because I'm not the Volkovs. Lucian returned to his desk, pulling up something on one of his monitors. Look at this. Elena rose carefully and moved to where she could see the screen. It showed a photo of Lucien, younger, standing with a woman who had his eyes, and a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. My sister Carlotta and my niece Juliana. Lucian's voice was quieter now. They died 8 years ago in an attack meant for me. A rival organization thought they could force my cooperation by targeting my family. They were wrong about the cooperation part, but they succeeded in destroying everything I valued. I'm sorry, Elena said, and meant it. I swore then that I would never allow innocents to be used as weapons again. Not in my name, not in my presence, not while I have the power to prevent it. Lucien closed the screen. Your daughter is innocent. She didn't choose her father, didn't choose to be born into this situation. I won't see her harmed because of Adrian's sins. Elena searched his face for deception, for manipulation, but all she saw was a grief that mirrored her own fears. What do you want from me? Cooperation, patience, trust, eventually. Lucien ticked off the items. I need you to stay here, stay safe, let my people protect you while I deal with Adrian and the situation he created. In exchange, you and Sophia will have everything you need. Safety, comfort, security. For how long? I can't give you a timeline. These things resolve on their own schedule. Lucien met her eyes. But I can promise you this. I will not keep you here one day longer than necessary for your protection. A soft knock interrupted them. One of Lucien's men, the one from yesterday who had shown Elena the photographs, entered without waiting for permission. Boss, we have movement. Lucien's entire demeanor shifted, tension replacing the relative calm he'd shown during their conversation. Where? Adrian contacted his lawyer 30 minutes ago. Kemper's office is under surveillance. The call was brief, but we got a trace. He's still in the city? Appears so. Kemper advised him to run just like you instructed, but Adrian's not listening. He wants to negotiate. Lucien's smile was dangerous. Of course he does. He thinks he can talk his way out of this. He glanced at Elena. Does that sound like him? The negotiator? The smooth talker? Elena thought about the man she'd married, the one who had convinced her to ignore her instincts, to trust his version of events even when evidence suggested otherwise. Yes, that's exactly like him. Then he's more predictable than I thought. Lucien turned back to his man. Set up a meeting, neutral ground, my security protocols. Let him think he has a chance to fix this. And when he arrives, we'll have a conversation about responsibility and consequences. Lucien's voice was ice. Elena, I need you to go back to your suite now. What happens next isn't something you need to witness. Elena should have been relieved to be dismissed, to avoid whatever violence was about to unfold. Instead, she found herself asking, Are you going to kill him? Lucien studied her carefully. Would you care if I did? She thought about the question, really thought about it. Adrian had betrayed her, abandoned her pregnant, filed for divorce the day Sophia was born. He'd put them both in danger through his greed and stupidity. Did she care what happened to him? No, she said finally. But I care what it means for Sophia. Legally, emotionally, everything. If you kill her father, that's something she'll have to carry. I'm not planning to kill him. I'm planning to make him useful. Lucien's expression softened slightly. Despite what you might think, I don't kill people casually. It's bad for business and creates complications. Adrian is worth more to me alive and motivated than dead and useless. The assessment was cold but pragmatic, and Elena found herself almost believing him. What will you do to him? Make him understand the cost of betrayal. Make him work to repay his debts. Make him realize that some mistakes don't end with death. They end with obligation. Lucien nodded toward the door. Now please, go. Sophia will bring you lunch later. If you need anything, use the phone in your suite. Elena left the library with Sophia, her mind churning. She'd expected a monster, and instead she'd found something more complicated. A man capable of violence who chose restraint. A criminal with a code of ethics that made a twisted kind of sense. Back in her suite, she laid Sophia on a blanket on the floor for tummy time and tried to process everything. Through the windows, she could see more security personnel than before. All of them alert. All of them armed. Whatever was about to happen with Adrian, Lucien was taking no chances. The hours crawled past. Sophia brought lunch as promised. Chicken Caesar salad, homemade bread, and iced tea. She also brought a baby monitor and showed Elena how to use it. Just in case you need to step away and want to keep an ear on her, Sophia explained, the range covers the entire estate. Thank you. Elena hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. How long have you worked for Lucien? Sophia settled into the chair across from Elena. 15 years. I started as his sister's housekeeper before she died. He asked me to stay on afterward, said he needed someone who understood what family meant. Is he always like this? So controlled? Lucien learned early that emotion is a vulnerability. He feels things deeply, but he's learned to channel those feelings into action rather than reaction. Sophia's smile was sad. After Carlotta and Juliana died, he could have torn the city apart looking for revenge. Instead, he systematically dismantled the organization responsible piece by piece over 3 years. No rage, no drama, just cold, calculated justice. That's supposed to reassure me? It's supposed to help you understand who's protecting you. Sophia stood. He made you a promise, Elena. He'll keep it, no matter what it costs him. After Sophia left, Elena found herself at the window again, watching the grounds as afternoon faded toward evening. Sophia had fallen asleep after a bottle, exhausted from her own baby version of tummy time. Elena should have slept too, should have taken advantage of the quiet, But her mind wouldn't stop. She thought about Adrian, about the life they'd built that turned out to be constructed on lies. She thought about the divorce papers she'd never signed, the freedom that had been snatched away just as she'd reached for it. She thought about Lucien Moretti, this dangerous stranger who had somehow become her only protection against an even more dangerous world. The sound of vehicles approaching pulled her from her thoughts. Through the window, she watched 3 black SUVs pull up to the main entrance. Men emerged, their movements efficient and military precise. And in the middle of it all, surrounded by Lucien's security, was Adrian. Even from a distance, Elena could see the difference in him. The confident businessman who had walked away from their marriage was gone. This version of Adrian looked haunted, his expensive suit rumpled, his normally perfect hair disheveled. His hands were bound, not with handcuffs, but with plastic zip ties that spoke of practicality rather than law enforcement. She watched as they led him inside, watched as Lucien emerged from the mansion to meet him. Even from her window, she could read the power dynamic. Lucien standing straight and calm, Adrian hunched and desperate. Whatever conversation they were about to have, Elena was glad she wouldn't hear it. She turned away from the window and went to check on Sophia, who slept peacefully, unaware that her father had just walked into a lion's den of his own making. Elena stroked her daughter's soft cheek, marveling at how something so pure could exist in the middle of so much darkness. An hour later, a knock at her door preceded Sophia's entrance. The older woman looked troubled. "Mr. Moretti asks if you would join him in the library. Adrian is requesting to see you and Sophia." Elena's first instinct was to refuse, but curiosity and perhaps a need for closure made her nod. "Give me a minute." She checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror, making sure she looked composed, strong. Then she carefully lifted Sophia, who stirred but didn't wake, and followed Sophia downstairs. The library looked different than it had that morning. Adrian sat in the chair Elena had occupied earlier, his wrists still bound, 2 of Lucien's men flanking him. His face when he saw Elena was a mix of relief and desperation that made her stomach turn. "Elena. Thank God." Adrian tried to stand, but one of the guards placed a hand on his shoulder, keeping him seated. "Are you okay? Is Sophia—" "We're fine." Elena's voice was cold. "No thanks to you. I can explain everything. The business, the money, all of it. I was trying to save the company, trying to save yourself," Lucien interrupted from where he stood by the windows. "Let's not dress this up as noble sacrifice, Adrian. You gambled with other people's money and lost. You made deals with people who don't accept failure. And when it all fell apart, you ran and left your wife and infant daughter to clean up your mess." Adrian's face flushed. "I didn't know they'd go after her. I thought—" "You didn't think at all." Elena moved closer, letting him see Sophia properly. "You filed for divorce the day she was born. You never even asked about her, never wanted to know if she was healthy, if I was okay, nothing. And now you want what? Sympathy? Understanding?" "I want my family back." Adrian's voice cracked. "I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But I love you. I love both of you." The laugh that escaped Elena was sharp enough to make Sophia stir. "You don't know what love is. Love doesn't abandon. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't put its family in danger because it's too greedy and stupid to see consequences." "Please." Adrian looked at Lucien. "I'll give you everything, the money, the information, access to the Volkov's operations. Just let me be with my family, protect all of us." "Well," Lucien's expression was almost pitying. "You still don't understand. Elena and Sophia aren't your family anymore. You gave up that right when you chose yourself over them." He moved to stand beside Elena. "They're under my protection now, my responsibility, my commitment. You can't just take my wife and daughter. I didn't take them. They came to me because you left them with no other choice." Lucien's voice was quiet, but absolute. "Here's what's going to happen, Adrian. You're going to work for me. You're going to use every connection, every piece of information, every resource you have to undo the damage you've caused. You're going to help me neutralize the Volkov threat and recover my investment. And if I refuse, then I'll hand you over to the Volkovs myself and let them do what they do best. But before that, I'll make sure Elena and Sophia disappear somewhere even I can't find them, just to ensure you die knowing you failed them completely." The color drained from Adrian's face. You're a monster. No, I'm a businessman. Lucian gestured to his men. Take him to the secure room. Make sure he's comfortable enough to think, but uncomfortable enough to understand his situation. As they hauled Adrian to his feet, he looked at Elena one last time. I'm sorry for everything. Elena met his eyes without flinching. I don't care. They dragged him from the library, his protests fading as they moved deeper into the mansion. Elena stood still, Sophia's weight in her arms grounding her until the sounds disappeared entirely. Thank you, she said finally. Lucien raised an eyebrow. For what? For not making me forgive him. For not pretending he deserves a second chance. He doesn't. Some betrayals are too complete for redemption. Lucien moved back to his desk. But he can still be useful, and usefulness can sometimes substitute for redemption in terms of practical outcomes. Elena looked down at Sophia, who had woken and was looking around with curious eyes. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow, we start planning how to end this situation permanently. Lucian's smile was grim. The Volkovs think they're hunting Adrian. They don't know I have him. That gives us an advantage, but only if we use it wisely. You said you weren't planning to kill them. I'm not. I'm planning to make them irrelevant. Lucian pulled up files on his computer. There are many ways to win a war, Elena. Death is just the most obvious and least creative. As Elena left the library, Sophia gurgling contentedly against her shoulder, she realized something that should have terrified her, but instead felt almost like relief. She'd spent months trapped in a marriage built on lies, pretending everything was fine while her world crumbled. Now she was trapped in a mansion surrounded by criminals, and somehow it felt more honest than anything she'd experienced with Adrian. At least here, nobody pretended the danger wasn't real. At least here, the monster protecting her didn't claim to be a prince. That night, Elena finally slept, Sophia safe in the crib beside her bed, armed guards patrolling the hallways outside. And for the first time since the courthouse, she didn't dream of running. She dreamed of standing her ground. The routine established itself over the following week with unexpected ease. Elena woke each morning to find breakfast waiting outside her suite, prepared exactly how she liked it after Sophia had quietly observed her preferences. She spent mornings with Sophia, afternoons walking the estate grounds under the watchful eyes of Lucien's security team, and evenings in her suite reading from the extensive library Sophia had made available to her. She saw Lucien rarely during those first days. He was orchestrating something complex. She could tell from the increased activity around the mansion, the constant flow of visitors who arrived in expensive cars and left looking either satisfied or terrified. She didn't ask what he was doing. Part of her didn't want to know. But on the 8th day, everything changed. Elena was in the nursery changing Sophia's diaper while singing softly, when she heard the distinctive sound of raised voices from somewhere below. Not shouting exactly, but the kind of controlled anger that was somehow more frightening than rage. She finished with Sophia, picking her up and moving to the window. The courtyard was filled with vehicles she didn't recognize, and men in suits that looked expensive but wrong somehow, cut differently than Lucien's people wore. They moved with an arrogance that made Elena's skin crawl, and in the center of them stood a man who could only be described as deliberately intimidating. Tall, broad-shouldered, with platinum blonde hair, and a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. She watched as Lucien emerged from the mansion, flanked by his own security. Even from her window, she could see the tension in every line of his body, the way his men had positioned themselves for maximum tactical advantage. This wasn't a friendly visit. Sophia appeared in her doorway without knocking, her face pale. Elena, I need you to take Sophia to the safe room, now. What's happening? The Volkovs are here. They've requested a meeting. Sophia's hands were shaking as she gestured urgently. Lucien agreed to hear them out, but we need you somewhere they can't see you, can't know you're here. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Where's the safe room? Sophia led her quickly down the hallway to what looked like a linen closet. She pressed a specific pattern on what appeared to be decorative molding, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a steel door with a biometric lock. Your palm print was already added to the system, Sophia explained, pressing Elena's hand against the scanner. The door opened with a mechanical hiss. Inside, you'll find everything you need: food, water, supplies for Sophia. There's a monitor that shows feeds from the security cameras. Lock yourself in and don't come out until Lucien or I give you the all clear with the code word. What's the code word? Sanctuary. Sophia's eyes were wet. If anyone says anything else, even if it sounds urgent, don't open this door. Do you understand? Elena nodded, clutching Sophia tighter. What about you? I'll be fine. They're not here for the staff. Sophia squeezed her arm. Go. Now. The safe room was smaller than Elena expected, but efficiently designed. Reinforced walls, a single cot, shelves stocked with supplies, and a wall of monitors showing different angles of the estate. She locked the door behind her, heard the heavy bolts slide into place, and felt the weight of isolation settle over her like a blanket. Sophia began to fuss, picking up on Elena's anxiety. Elena sat on the cot, nursing her daughter while watching the monitors, trying to understand what was unfolding outside her sanctuary. The main monitor showed the courtyard. Lucien and the scarred man stood perhaps 10 feet apart, their respective security details forming two opposing walls of armed tension. Elena fumbled with the controls and found the audio feed. Unexpected Dmitri, showing up at my home without invitation. Lucien's voice was calm, but Elena had learned to recognize the steel underneath his courtesy. Perhaps if you returned phone calls, Lucien, formal visits wouldn't be necessary. The scarred man, Dmitry Volkov, Elena realized, spoke with a thick Russian accent. We have business to discuss. I wasn't aware we had business. Your organization and mine have maintained careful distance for good reason. That distance was violated when you began harboring assets that belonged to us. Dmitri's smile was predatory. Adrian Russo owes my family considerable debt. We've been looking for him. Imagine my surprise when I learned he's been a guest in your estate. Elena's breath caught. How did they know? How had they found out? Lucien's expression didn't change. Adrian Russo owes me $12 million in compensation for betraying my trust. He's working off that debt under my supervision. What claim do you have on him? He sold us information worth far more than your $12 million. Information about your operations, your vulnerabilities, your territories. Dmitri took a step forward. Then he disappeared with money we paid him for services not yet rendered. That makes him our problem to resolve. Interesting theory, except he's physically in my custody, which makes him my problem. Lucien matched Dmitri's step with one of his own. Unless you're suggesting you have some legal right to him, should we involve the authorities to settle this dispute? The mention of authorities made several of Dmitri's men shift uncomfortably. Dmitri's smile hardened. You know we don't operate that way. Then we're at an impasse. I have Adrian, you want Adrian, but possession, as they say, is 9/10 of the law. Lucien gestured to his men. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave my property. When I'm finished extracting value from Mr. Russo, we can discuss whether there's anything left worth sharing. And his wife? His child? Dmitri's question was casual, but Elena felt ice flood her veins. Are they also assets you're extracting value from? Lucien's entire demeanor shifted. It was subtle, but Elena saw it on the monitor. The way his shoulders squared, the way his hands, which had been relaxed at his sides, curled into loose fists. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. We've been watching Russo's lawyer. We know his wife came to the courthouse for divorce proceedings. We know she left with your people. We know she never returned home. Dmitri's voice dropped to something almost pleasant, which made it more threatening. So where is Elena Marquez? Where's the baby? If Mrs. Russo is under my protection, it's because her husband's actions put her at risk. That has nothing to do with you. Everything Adrian Russo touches has to do with us now. He made that choice when he took our money. Dmitri spread his hands. I'm being reasonable, Lucien. Give us Russo and his family. We'll handle our business quietly, professionally. No war, no escalation, no problems between our organizations. Elena felt sick. They wanted all of them. They wanted to erase Adrian's entire bloodline, just like Lucien had warned. No. Lucien's voice was flat, absolute. Elena Marquez and her daughter are innocent civilians caught in circumstances beyond their control. They're under my protection, and that protection is non-negotiable. Everything is negotiable. Not this. Lucian took another step forward, close enough now that his security detail tensed. I lost my sister and niece to animals who thought family members were acceptable targets. I swore then that I would never allow such brutality in my sphere of influence. So let me be crystal clear, Dmitri. The woman and child are off limits, completely. If you or anyone in your organization makes a move toward them, I will consider it a declaration of war. Dmitri studied Lucian for a long moment, then laughed. It was a cold, mirthless sound. For a woman you barely know? For a child that isn't yours? You'd risk everything we've carefully built in this city. I've built what I have through strength and reputation. Backing down from a threat to innocence would damage that reputation irreparably. Lucian's voice was quiet enough that Elena had to turn up the audio. So yes, Dmitri, I would risk it. The question is whether you want to test my resolve. The tension in the courtyard was palpable, even through the monitor. Elena watched men on both sides adjust their positions, hands drifting toward weapons. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the estate would become a battlefield. Sophia had finished nursing and was drowsing against Elena's shoulder. Elena held her breath, waiting for violence to erupt, waiting for the safety of the reinforced room to be tested. Finally, Dmitri stepped back. You're making a mistake, Lucian. The Volkov family doesn't forget. We don't forgive. You're choosing the wrong side of this conflict. I'm choosing the side that lets me sleep at night. You should try it sometime. Lucian gestured toward the gates. Leave. Now. Before my patience runs out. Dmitri's men began moving back toward their vehicles, but Dmitri himself paused. 1 week, Lucian, I'll give you 1 week to reconsider. After that, anyone harboring Adrian Russo or his family becomes a legitimate target. That includes you, your people, everyone in this mansion. Noted. Now get off my property. Elena watched the Volkovs leave, their vehicles peeling out with deliberate aggression, kicking up gravel as they sped through the gates. Only after they disappeared from view did Lucian's men relax slightly, though their weapons remained accessible. Lucian stood in the courtyard for several minutes after the Volkovs left, his head bowed, his hands clasped behind his back. Elena could see him thinking, calculating, planning. Then he turned and walked back into the mansion, his movements controlled but somehow weary. 20 minutes passed before she heard a knock on the safe room door. Elena, it's Sophia. The code word is sanctuary. You can come out now. Elena unlocked the door carefully, half expecting a trick, but it was just Sophia looking exhausted and relieved. Is it over? For now. Sophia helped her back to the suite. But things are going to get more complicated. Lucien was waiting in her sitting room, standing by the window with his back to the door. He turned when they entered, and Elena was struck by how tired he looked. Not physically, but the kind of soul-deep exhaustion that came from carrying too much weight for too long. I'm sorry you had to hear that, he said without preamble. You stood up for us. Elena's voice was unsteady. You put yourself and your organization at risk to protect people you barely know. I told you I would protect you. I keep my word. Lucian moved to the sofa, gesturing for her to sit. But I need you to understand what that confrontation means. The Volkovs won't back down. They'll see my protection of you as a weakness to exploit, a vulnerability to target. So what happens now? Now we prepare for war. Lucian's voice was grim. I've been trying to resolve this situation diplomatically, to use Adrian's information and resources to neutralize the Volkov threat without direct conflict. That option is no longer viable. They've forced my hand. Elena sat down carefully, adjusting Sophia in her arms. You're going to fight them. I'm going to eliminate them as a threat. There's a difference. Lucian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Fighting is reactive, chaotic. What I'm planning is systematic dismantling. Their businesses, their alliances, their resources, everything that gives them power in this city. I'm going to take it apart piece by piece until they have no choice but to retreat or be destroyed. That sounds like it could take months. Weeks, if I'm efficient. Days, if I'm willing to be ruthless. Lucian met her eyes. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. What? Are you willing to stay here through whatever comes next? Because I can arrange to move you somewhere safer, somewhere far from this city and this conflict. You and Sophia could disappear, start fresh under new identities. I have the resources to make that happen. Elena looked down at her daughter, who was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. The offer was tempting. Disappear, start over, leave all of this behind. But something stopped her from accepting immediately. If I leave, she said slowly, does that make your position weaker? Does it give the Volkovs what they want? Lucian's expression showed surprise. It removes you as a target, which removes their leverage. But yes, strategically, it would be interpreted as me backing down from my protection commitment. Then I stay. The words came out more confidently than Elena felt. You've protected us when you didn't have to. You've kept your promises when my own husband broke everyone he made. I'm not going to repay that by running away and making you look weak. This isn't about gratitude or repayment. This is about your safety and Sophia's. And what about your safety? Elena challenged. What about Sophia and all the people who work here? What about your reputation and your ability to protect others in the future? If the Volkovs learn they can force you to back down by threatening innocents, how many more innocents will they threaten? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. You're thinking strategically. That's dangerous. I'm thinking like a mother. If we run now, we'll always be running. There will always be another threat, another dangerous man looking for leverage. Elena shifted Sophia to her other arm. But if you stop the Volkovs, if you prove that threatening your protection doesn't work, maybe Sophia grows up in a world where she doesn't have to hide. That's optimistic. That's desperate. Elena's voice cracked slightly. I don't want to raise my daughter in fear. I don't want her first years to be defined by running and hiding. So if staying here, if being part of whatever you're planning, gives her a chance at something better, then that's what I choose. Lucian stood, moving to the window again. You realize what you're saying yes to. The estate will become a fortress. There will be armed guards everywhere. You'll hear things, see things that you can't unhear or unsee. And if the Volkovs attack before I can neutralize them, this mansion could become a war zone. I understand. Do you? He turned to face her. Because once we start down this path, there's no going back. You'll be complicit in whatever I do to stop them. That weight doesn't disappear just because your intentions were pure. Elena thought about the photographs Lucian had shown her that first day in the courthouse, the bodies arranged like warnings. She thought about Adrian, locked somewhere in this mansion, paying for his betrayals. She thought about the life she'd imagined when she married him, the fairy tale that had turned into a nightmare. I'm already complicit, she said quietly. I married a criminal without knowing it. I gave birth to his child. I walked into that courthouse and triggered everything that followed. None of this is my fault, but all of it involves me. So I might as well choose which side I'm complicit with. Lucian's smile was small but genuine. You're stronger than you look, Elena Marquez. I'm a mother. Strength isn't optional. She stood, cradling Sophia. So what do we do now? Now I make some phone calls and remind people why crossing me is a bad idea. Lucian moved toward the door. You should rest. Tomorrow I'm increasing security around your suite. You'll have a personal detail assigned to you whenever you leave these rooms. Will I see you? The question came out before Elena could stop it, and she felt her face flush. Lucian paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Yes, he said finally. I think it's important that you understand what's happening, what's being done in your name. I'll brief you daily on our progress. After he left, Elena put Sophia in the crib and stood at the window, looking out over the estate grounds. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. It should have been beautiful, peaceful. Instead, it looked like a battlefield waiting to happen. That night, as Elena tried to sleep, she heard increased activity throughout the mansion. Footsteps in the hallways, quiet conversations in languages she didn't understand, the occasional sound of vehicles arriving and departing. Lucien was mobilizing his forces, preparing for war. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something almost like purpose. For months, she'd been passive, letting life happen to her, accepting Adrian's betrayals and dismissals because she didn't know how to fight back. Now finally, she was making choices that mattered. Dangerous choices, maybe, but hers. The next morning, Elena woke to find a woman waiting in her sitting room. She was perhaps 30, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She wore tactical clothing and moved with the efficient grace of someone trained for violence. Mrs. Marquez, I'm Natasha. Mr. Moretti assigned me to your security detail. Her accent was faint, Eastern European, but softened by years elsewhere. I'll be with you whenever you leave your suite, and I'll be stationed outside your door at night. Is that really necessary? After yesterday's visit from the Volkovs? Yes. Natasha's expression was professional, but not unkind. Mr. Moretti doesn't take chances with people under his protection. You and your daughter are now his highest priority. Elena found herself in a strange new routine over the following days. Natasha accompanied her everywhere, a constant silent presence who somehow made Elena feel both safer and more aware of the danger surrounding them. She watched Natasha scan every room before Elena entered, watched her hand drift to the weapon concealed beneath her jacket whenever unfamiliar sounds echoed through the mansion. Lucien kept his promise about daily briefings. Each evening, after Sophia was asleep, Elena would go to his library and he would explain what was happening in the larger war she'd become part of. We've frozen 3 of the Volkov family's bank accounts, he told her on the 3rd day. Legitimate business accounts they were using to launder money. Without access to those funds, they can't pay their street-level operatives. Won't they just use cash? They would, if I hadn't also convinced their primary cash storage facility to close for renovations. Lucian's smile was sharp. The building's owner owed me a favor. He's suddenly discovered structural issues that require immediate attention. On the 5th day, 2 of the Volkov's city council allies have announced they won't be seeking re-election. Turns out their constituents are very interested in their voting records on zoning laws that benefited certain criminal enterprises. You leaked information? I provided concerned citizens with publicly available voting records and property ownership data. What they do with that information is their choice. Lucien poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter on his desk. Politics is just another battlefield, Elena. You win by controlling information. On the 7th day, Dmitri's deadline, Elena expected violence. Instead, Lucien showed her surveillance footage of a warehouse on the docks going up in flames. That was one of the Volkov's primary distribution centers for smuggled goods, he explained. Insurance will cover the loss, but the investigation will tie up their operations for months. And the fire marshal I've been cultivating will be very thorough in his examination of building code violations. Elena watched the flames on the monitor. You're destroying their empire without firing a shot. Bullets are expensive and attract attention. Financial pressure and legal complications are much more elegant. Lucien closed the laptop. But don't mistake elegance for mercy. I'm still destroying them. Just slowly enough that they feel every loss. And Adrian? What's his role in all this? Lucien's expression hardened. Adrian is providing information about the Volkov's operations, their contacts, their vulnerabilities. He's proving surprisingly cooperative when properly motivated. What motivation? The knowledge that his daughter's safety depends on his usefulness. Lucien met her eyes. I told him that the moment he stops being valuable, I have no reason to maintain my protection of you and Sophia. It's not true, but he doesn't know that. Elena should have been disturbed by the manipulation. Instead, she felt a grim satisfaction. He's scared. He's terrified, as he should be. Lucien stood, moving to the window that had become his default position during their conversations. He destroyed lives through his greed. He should face consequences. But you're not killing him. Death would be easier for him than what I'm doing. He has to live with his failures, his fear, his knowledge that he gambled everything and lost. Lucien turned to face her. Sometimes the cruelest punishment is survival. Their conversations had developed a strange intimacy born from shared danger and forced proximity. Elena found herself looking forward to these evening briefings, to the way Lucien spoke to her like an equal rather than a victim or a burden. He asked her opinions, listened when she questioned his strategies, even adjusted his plans based on her insights about Adrian's psychology. You would have made a good strategist, he told her one evening, after she'd suggested a way to pressure one of the Volkov's allies. You think several moves ahead. I think like someone who's been manipulated, Elena corrected. I've learned to recognize the games people play. That's what makes you valuable. You understand psychology, motivation, weakness. Lucien's gaze was thoughtful. Most people in my world understand violence and money. Few understand the more subtle forms of power. Elena felt heat rise in her face at the compliment. I'm just trying to survive. No, You're trying to build something better from terrible circumstances. That's different. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Elena couldn't quite name. Then Sophia's cry cut through the tension, and Elena excused herself to return to her suite. But as she nursed her daughter that night, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Lucien had looked at her, the respect in his voice when he called her valuable. It was different from how Adrian had made her feel. Adrian had made her feel chosen, special, elevated to a world above her station. Lucien made her feel capable, strong, equal. It was the difference between being treasured and being respected. Elena was beginning to understand which one mattered more. The attack came on the 9th day, swift and brutal, and exactly as Lucien had predicted. Elena was in the nursery with Sophia when the alarms began to wail, a sound like the end of the world compressed into electronic screaming. Natasha burst through the door before Elena could even react. "Safe room! Now! Move!" Natasha had her weapon drawn, her free hand gripping Elena's arm. They ran through the hallways, Natasha somehow managing to move quickly while still checking corners, still maintaining tactical awareness. Behind them, Elena heard sounds she'd only encountered in movies: gunfire, shouting, explosions that made the mansion shudder. The safe room door was already open. Sophia waited inside, pale but composed. "Hurry!" Natasha pushed Elena inside, then positioned herself at the door. "I'll be right outside. Lock it behind me." "Wait," Elena started, but Natasha was already gone, the heavy door swinging shut. Elena engaged the locks, heard the bolt slide home, and turned to find Sophia preparing formula with shaking hands. "They're here," Sophia said quietly. "The Volkovs. They're attacking." Elena clutched Sophia tighter and moved to the monitors. The screens showed chaos, armed men pouring through breaches in the estate walls, Lucien's security forces forming defensive lines, gunfire lighting up the twilight like deadly fireworks. And in the center of it all, she saw Lucien. He moved through the battle with the same controlled grace he brought to everything, a weapon in his hands, his men following his commands with absolute trust. He wasn't hiding in safety while others fought. He was leading from the front, protecting his territory and everyone in it, protecting her. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably less than 30 minutes. Elena watched men fall on both sides, watched Lucien's forces slowly push back the invaders, watched the estate that had become her sanctuary transform into a war zone. And she understood, finally and completely, what Lucien had tried to warn her about. This was the world she'd chosen to stay in. This violence, this danger, this brutal reality where safety was maintained through strength and defended through blood. She should have regretted her choice. Instead, watching Lucien fight to protect her and Sophia, Elena felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the recognition that some men proved their worth not through promises, but through action. Adrian had promised her everything and delivered nothing. Lucien had promised her protection and was bleeding for it in the courtyard below. The difference mattered more than Elena had ever imagined possible. When the gunfire finally stopped, the silence was almost worse than the chaos. Elena stood frozen in front of the monitors, Sophia pressed against her chest, watching as Lucien's men moved through the grounds, checking bodies and securing the perimeter. Smoke drifted across the screens, obscuring parts of the courtyard where fires had been extinguished. The estate looked like a battlefield, and in every way that mattered, it had been. "How many?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Elena counted the still forms on the ground, her stomach churning. "I don't know, too many." On the monitor showing the main entrance, she watched Lucien holster his weapon and speak into a radio. Even through the grainy security feed, she could see blood on his shirt, though whether it was his or someone else's, she couldn't tell. He gestured sharply to his men, directing them with the same controlled authority he'd shown throughout the battle. A knock on the safe room door made both women jump. "It's Natasha. Code word is sanctuary. The threat has been neutralized." Elena unlocked the door with shaking hands. Natasha stood in the hallway, a cut above her left eye and her tactical vest scorched from what looked like a near-miss explosion. "Are you both all right?" "We're fine. What about—" Elena stopped herself. She'd been about to ask about Lucien, and the concern in her voice would have been too revealing. "Mr. Moretti is coordinating cleanup. He asked me to escort you back to your suite once you felt safe enough to move." Natasha's expression softened slightly. It's over, Mrs. Marquez. They're not coming back. The walk back to her suite felt surreal. The mansion's interior had largely been spared, but Elena could see bullet holes in some walls, shattered windows, paintings knocked askew from explosions. Staff members were already beginning cleanup, their faces drawn but determined. Back in her rooms, Elena changed Sophia's diaper with mechanical precision, her hands still trembling. The baby was fussy, picking up on the residual tension, and it took longer than usual to get her settled. By the time Sophia finally fell asleep, exhaustion was pulling at Elena like an undertow. She should have tried to rest. Instead, she found herself pacing to the window, looking out over the grounds where men were loading bodies into unmarked vans. The pragmatic disposal of the dead should have horrified her. Instead, she felt a grim understanding. This was Lucien's world, and in his world, evidence disappeared and problems were solved with brutal efficiency. Another knock. This time it was Sophia carrying a first aid kit. He's asking for you. Lucien? He's in his study. He's hurt, but he won't let anyone tend to him until he's finished debriefing his security team. Sophia pressed the first aid kit into Elena's hands. He might listen to you. Elena wanted to refuse, to stay in the safety of her suite and pretend the battle hadn't happened. But the weight of the first aid kit in her hands felt like a responsibility she couldn't ignore. Will you watch Sophia? Of course. She found Lucien exactly where Sophia said he'd be, standing behind his desk reviewing security footage with 3 of his men. He'd removed his ruined jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing a deep gash on his left forearm that was still bleeding sluggishly. His face was pale beneath the blood spatter, his jaw tight with pain he was clearly ignoring. The men looked up when Elena entered, surprise flickering across their faces. Lucien's eyes met hers, and something in his expression shifted. Gentlemen, we'll continue this in an hour. Make sure the perimeter is reinforced and double the guard rotations. His voice was steady despite his obvious injuries. I want a full casualty report and damage assessment by morning. The men filed out, leaving Elena alone with Lucien. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that had happened, everything they'd survived. Sophia said you were hurt. Elena set the first aid kit on his desk. It's nothing serious. You're bleeding. I've had worse. But even as he said it, Lucien swayed slightly, catching himself on the edge of the desk. Elena moved before she could second-guess herself, pulling out the desk chair. Sit. Now. To her surprise, he obeyed. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into every line of his face, the way his hands trembled slightly as he rested them on his knees. This wasn't the composed strategist or the dangerous crime lord. This was a man who had just fought a war and was running on nothing but adrenaline and willpower. Let me see your arm. Elena opened the first aid kit, grateful for the first aid training she'd received when Sophia was born. The gash was deep but clean, probably from a knife rather than shrapnel. You don't have to do this, Lucien said quietly. You got hurt protecting me and my daughter. The least I can do is clean a wound. Elena began wiping away the blood with antiseptic wipes, working as gently as she could. Lucien flinched but didn't pull away. The intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on her. Standing this close to him, touching his bare skin, seeing him vulnerable in a way she'd never expected. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the muscle definition in his forearms, the old scars that suggested this wasn't his first battle. This needs stitches, she said, examining the wound more closely. I'll have my doctor look at it later. Your doctor is probably dealing with more serious injuries right now. Elena pulled out the suture kit from the first aid supplies, her hands steadier now that she had a task to focus on. I can do basic stitches. I had to learn when I was pregnant. The clinic I went to offered free classes for expectant mothers. Lucien watched her thread the needle with surprising skill. You're full of unexpected talents. I'm full of survival skills masquerading as talents. Elena positioned herself closer, one hand steadying his arm. This is going to hurt. I know. His voice was rough. Do it. She worked quickly, each stitch precise and careful. Lucien didn't make a sound, but she could feel the tension in his muscles, the way he held himself absolutely still. When she finished, she wrapped the wound in clean gauze and secured it with medical tape. There, not pretty, but functional. Elena stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they'd been, how her hands had lingered on his skin longer than necessary. "Thank you." Lucien flexed his arm carefully, testing the stitches. "You did well. I had good motivation." Elena began cleaning up the medical supplies, needing something to do with her hands. "I watched the battle on the monitors. You were exposed, vulnerable. If something had happened to you, nothing happened. This time." She turned to face him. "But they came here, Lucien. They attacked your home, put everyone at risk. And it's because of me, because you wouldn't give me up. It's because of their greed and violence, not because of you." Lucien stood, moving to his usual position by the window. "Don't take responsibility for other people's evil choices." "That's rich coming from you." The words came out sharper than Elena intended. "You're taking responsibility for protecting me. You're putting your life and your people's lives at risk because you made a promise to a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore." The admission hung in the air between them. Elena's breath caught. "What am I then?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment, his back still to her. "You're someone I respect, someone who's stronger than she knows, someone whose presence in this house has reminded me why I made certain vows after my sister died. I'm just a woman trying to protect her child. You're more than that, and you know it." He turned to face her. "You could have run when I offered. You could have disappeared, started over, let me handle this alone. But you stayed. You chose to be part of this, to stand with me against people who would destroy everything you love. I stayed because running meant you looked weak. I stayed because Sophia deserves better than a life spent hiding. You stayed because you're brave." Lucien crossed the distance between them, moving with the predatory grace that had become familiar. "You can dress it up however you want, but I recognize courage when I see it." Elena found she couldn't look away from his eyes, storm gray and intense. "You're the one who just fought off an army. I fought with an army. My men, my resources, my training. You're fighting with nothing but will and determination to give your daughter a better future." His hand rose, almost touching her face, before he seemed to catch himself and lower it. "That's a different kind of strength." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Elena could feel her heart hammering, could feel the pull toward this man who had proven himself in ways Adrian never had. It would be so easy to close the distance, to seek comfort in his arms after the terror of the battle. But Sophia's soft cry from the nursery broke the spell. Elena stepped back, the reality of their situation crashing back over her. "I should go. She needs me." "Of course." Lucien's voice was carefully neutral. "Elena, before you go, the battle tonight changes things." "How?" "The Volkovs committed significant resources to this attack and failed. That failure makes them vulnerable. My contacts in law enforcement are ready to move on their operations, but I need Adrian's testimony to make the charges stick." Lucien moved back to his desk, the professional mask sliding back into place. "I'm going to offer Adrian a deal, his cooperation in exchange for witness protection and a chance to disappear." Elena's stomach tightened. "You're letting him go." "I'm using him to finish what he started. The federal investigation will dismantle what's left of the Volkov organization. Adrian gets to live, which is more mercy than he deserves, but in exchange, he gives up any claim to you or Sophia. He already gave that up when he filed for divorce. Legally, perhaps. But I want him to say it, to sign documents that make it permanent and irrevocable. No custody claims, no future contact, nothing. He walks away from both of you completely." Elena should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something more complicated. "When?" "Tomorrow. I'm bringing him to the library to finalize the arrangements. I thought you might want to be there. To hear him give up his rights, to see him face the consequences of his choices." Part of Elena wanted to refuse, to avoid Adrian entirely. But Lucien was right. She needed to hear it, needed the closure of watching Adrian legally sever himself from their lives. "I'll be there." She paused at the door. "Lucien? Thank you. For tonight, for everything. I know I can't ever really repay what you've done, but you don't owe me anything." His voice was firm. "Protection isn't a debt. It's a choice I made freely." Back in her suite, Elena found Sophia rocking a fussy Sophia. The older woman looked up with relief when Elena entered. She's been asking for you. Well, crying for you, but it amounts to the same thing. Sophia transferred the baby carefully. How is he? Stitched and stubborn. Elena settled into the nursing chair, feeling Sophia latch on with desperate hunger. He's planning to finish this tomorrow, to use Adrian's testimony to bring down the Volkovs. That's good. It means this can end soon. And then what? Elena heard herself ask. Once Adrian's gone and the threat is over, what happens to us? Sophia's expression was knowing. That depends on what you want to happen. I don't know what I want. A week ago, I wanted a divorce and independence. Now I'm living in a crime lord's mansion, watching him fight battles on my behalf, feeling things I have no right to feel. Why don't you have a right to feel them? Because he's dangerous, because his world is violence and crime, because I should want normal and safe for Sophia, not whatever this is. Elena looked down at her daughter. But when I watched him fight tonight, when I saw him risk everything to keep us safe, I didn't feel fear. I felt something like belonging. Maybe normal and safe are overrated, Sophia said gently. Maybe what matters is finding someone who keeps their promises, who protects what they value, who treats you with respect and honesty. That's not enough to build a life on. Isn't it? You tried building a life on romance and passion with Adrian. How did that work out? Sophia stood, moving toward the door. Just think about it, Elena. Think about what kind of life you actually want, not what you think you're supposed to want. After Sophia left, Elena sat in the darkness with Sophia, processing everything. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and closure with Adrian. Tomorrow would bring the end of the immediate threat. Tomorrow would force her to make decisions about a future she couldn't quite envision. But tonight, she simply held her daughter and let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding. Somewhere between the courthouse and the battlefield, between terror and protection, she'd started to see Lucien Moretti not as her captor or even her protector, but as something more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. She'd started to see him as a man worth trusting, maybe even worth loving. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt almost like hope. Morning came too quickly. Elena dressed carefully in one of the outfits Sophia had provided. Simple black slacks and a cream blouse that made her look put together and strong. She wanted Adrian to see that she'd survived, that she'd moved beyond the broken woman he'd left behind. Sophia arrived to watch Sophia, her expression encouraging. You've got this. Remember, he has no power over you anymore. The library felt different in daylight, less like a command center and more like what it pretended to be, a gentleman's study filled with expensive furniture and rare books. Lucien stood by his desk, dressed in a dark suit that hid last night's injuries. Two of his men flanked the door, their presence a subtle reminder of the power dynamics at play. Adrian was already there, seated in the chair Elena had occupied so many times. He looked worse than when she'd last seen him, thinner, more haggard, the confidence that had once defined him completely stripped away. When he saw Elena enter, something like relief crossed his face. Elena, thank God. I was worried about you after the attack. Are you okay? Is Sophia... We're fine. Elena's voice was cool, controlled. No thanks to you. I never meant for any of this to happen. You have to believe me. Adrian tried to stand, but one of Lucien's men placed a hand on his shoulder, keeping him seated. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I never wanted you or our daughter in danger. And yet here we are. Lucien's voice cut through Adrian's excuses. Your greed put them in the crosshairs of one of the most violent criminal organizations in the city. Your betrayals triggered a war that could have killed everyone in this mansion. Your choices, Adrian, your consequences. Adrian's face flushed. I was trying to save my company, to preserve my father's legacy. You were trying to save yourself, and you were willing to sacrifice anyone and anything to do it. Lucien pulled out a folder from his desk. But we're not here to debate your motivations. We're here to finalize an arrangement. What arrangement? The federal government has agreed to grant you witness protection in exchange for your complete testimony about the Volkov organization's operations. You'll provide every piece of information you have, financial records, contacts, operational details, everything. Lucien opened the folder, revealing legal documents. In exchange, you get a new identity, relocation, and the promise that the government will keep you alive long enough to testify. Adrian leaned forward eagerly. And my debt to you? Considered paid through your cooperation and the value of the information you're providing. Lucien's smile was cold. But there are conditions. What conditions? Lucien slid documents across the desk. You sign away all parental rights to Sophia Russo. No custody, no visitation, no contact of any kind. You legally cease to be her father in any capacity beyond biological fact. The color drained from Adrian's face. You can't ask me to. I'm not asking. I'm telling you the terms of your survival. Lucien's voice was absolute. You want witness protection? You want a chance to start over? You give up your daughter, completely. Forever. Adrian looked at Elena, something desperate in his eyes. You can't want this. She's my child, my blood. You can't expect me to just walk away. You already walked away. Elena's voice was steady, despite the emotions churning inside her. You filed for divorce the day she was born. You never held her, never asked about her, never showed one moment of genuine interest in her existence. You don't get to claim fatherhood now that it's convenient. I was scared, overwhelmed. I made mistakes, but that doesn't mean I don't love her. Love is action, Adrian. Love is sacrifice. Love is showing up when things are hard. Elena moved closer, making him look at her. You've never loved anyone but yourself. So sign the papers and disappear. Give Sophia the gift of growing up without a father who sees her as a burden. Elena, please, sign the papers. Lucien's voice allowed no argument. Or I'll withdraw my cooperation with the federal investigation and let the Volkovs know exactly where to find you. Your choice. Adrian's hand shook as he reached for the pen. This isn't fair. You're forcing me. Fair would be letting you face the consequences of your betrayals without protection. Fair would be telling Elena every detail of how you stole from criminals and endangered your family to finance your lifestyle with Veronica. Lucien leaned forward. I'm offering you life, Adrian. A chance to start over somewhere new. All it costs is giving up something you never valued anyway. The pen hovered over the first signature line. Adrian looked at Elena one more time, and she saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing his options, his survival instincts overriding any paternal feeling he might have claimed to possess. He signed, page after page, signature after signature, legally severing himself from Sophia's life with the same casual ease he'd used to file for divorce. When he finished, Lucien collected the documents efficiently. The federal marshals will pick you up within the hour. You'll be processed into witness protection immediately. You'll testify in 6 weeks when the grand jury convenes. And then? Then you disappear into whatever new life they give you, and you never contact Elena or Sophia again. If you try, the protection agreement is void, and I'll personally ensure the Volkovs know where to find you. Adrian stood on shaky legs. Can I at least say goodbye? No. Elena's response was immediate and absolute. You gave up that right when you signed those papers. You're nothing to us now. Less than nothing. Elena, goodbye, Adrian. She turned her back on him, facing the window, refusing to watch him leave. I hope your new life is everything you deserve. She heard him escorted from the room, heard the door close behind him, heard the silence that followed his departure. Only then did she let herself feel the weight of what had just happened. Adrian was gone. Really, truly gone. The divorce she'd wanted, the freedom she'd craved, the clean break she'd thought impossible. All of it, finally real. Are you all right? Lucien's voice was gentle. Elena turned to face him, surprised to find tears on her cheeks. I don't know. I should feel relieved, but I just feel empty. That's normal. Closure doesn't always feel the way we expect it to. He gave her up so easily. Elena wiped at her tears. His own daughter, and he just signed her away like she was a business asset. He's a coward who values his own survival above everything else. Sophia is better off without him. Lucien moved closer, but maintained careful distance. You're better off without him. I know. I've known that for months. But seeing it, watching him choose himself again, Elena's voice broke. What kind of man does that? The kind who was never worthy of you in the first place. Lucien handed her a handkerchief from his pocket. You deserve better, Elena. You and Sophia both deserve people in your lives who fight for you, who sacrifice for you, who see your value and protect it. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Elena looked up at Lucien, this man who had done exactly what he described. fought for her, sacrificed for her, protected her when he'd had no obligation to do so. "Is that what you're doing?" she asked quietly. "Fighting for us?" Lucian's expression was unreadable. "I gave you my word that you'd be safe. I'm keeping that word." "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "No, it's not. And you deserve honesty, so here it is. When I first brought you here, it was purely strategic. You were leverage, a means to an end, a way to control Adrian and neutralize the Volkov threat." Elena's heart clenched, even though she'd suspected as much. But somewhere between that first day and last night's battle, something changed. Lucian's voice was low, almost reluctant. "You stopped being a strategic asset and became someone I actually care about protecting. Not because of what you represent or what you're worth in some larger game, but because you're Elena. Because you're strong and brave and better than the world you've been forced into." "Lucien, I'm not asking for anything," he interrupted. "I'm not expecting gratitude or reciprocation. I just need you to know that keeping you safe isn't a burden or an obligation anymore. It's a choice I make gladly every single day." Elena's chest felt tight. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Adrian is gone. Because the immediate threat is ending. Because soon you'll have the freedom to make real choices about your future, and I want you to make those choices with complete information." Lucien stepped back, creating physical distance even as his words pulled them closer. "When this is over, when you're truly safe, I'll help you build whatever life you want. If that means disappearing and starting fresh somewhere far from here, I'll make it happen. If it means staying close but separate, I'll respect that. Whatever you need." "And what if what I need is complicated?" The question escaped before Elena could stop it. Lucien's eyes met hers, and something sparked between them. Acknowledgement, possibility. The recognition that they were dancing around something neither of them wanted to name. "Then we'll figure it out together." A knock at the door broke the moment. One of Lucien's men entered without apology. "Boss, the federal marshals are here for Russo, and we've got confirmation. The Volkov lieutenants are moving. Looks like they're preparing to leave the city." Lucian's demeanor shifted instantly, professional focus replacing personal vulnerability. "How many?" "At least 6 senior members, plus their security. They're liquidating assets, closing accounts. Classic retreat pattern. They know they lost." Lucian's smile was predatory. "Adrian's testimony will finish what last night started. They're running before we can destroy them completely." "Should we intercept?" "No, let them run. Better to have them scattered and broken than desperate and cornered." Lucien turned back to Elena. "It's almost over. Another week, maybe 2, and the threat will be completely neutralized." Elena should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something close to panic. Because once the threat was gone, once she was truly safe, she'd have to make decisions about her future. And those decisions were complicated by the fact that somewhere in the chaos and danger, she'd developed feelings for a man whose world was built on violence and shadows. A man who had just admitted he cared about her. A man who was everything she should avoid and everything she actually needed. The next days blurred together in a strange mix of tension and routine. Elena watched the news reports about a major federal investigation into organized crime, saw footage of arrests and seizures, understood that everything Lucien had set in motion was coming to fruition. The Volkov organization was being systematically dismantled, exactly as he'd promised. Adrian testified before the grand jury, his face pale and nervous on the courtroom sketches shown on television. He looked like a stranger to Elena now, someone from another life entirely. When Sophia told her that Adrian had been processed into witness protection and disappeared, Elena felt nothing. No anger, no regret, not even satisfaction. Just the quiet acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. Throughout it all, Lucien maintained careful distance. They still had their evening briefings, but the personal moment they'd shared in the library wasn't repeated. He was professional, courteous, informative. But Elena could feel him holding back, giving her space to process everything that had happened. She should have appreciated the consideration. Instead, she found herself missing the intensity of their earlier conversations, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. On the 14th day after the battle, Lucien asked her to meet him in the library one final time. "It's over," he said without preamble. "The Volkov leadership has scattered. Most are in custody or fled the country. The few who remain don't have the resources or organization to pose a threat. You're safe, Elena. Truly safe. Elena's breath caught. So what happens now? Now you choose. Lucian pulled out another folder. I've had my people create several options for you. New identity and relocation package complete with financial support and documentation. Or if you prefer, a settlement that allows you to stay in this area under your own name with enough money to build a stable life for Sophia. Elena took the folder with numb hands. You've thought of everything. I promised I'd protect you. That includes protecting your future. Lucien's voice was carefully neutral. Whatever you choose, you'll have my support. Financial, legal, whatever you need to thrive. And if I choose to stay here? The question came out quietly. Lucien's expression flickered with something Elena couldn't quite read. Then you'd still have your own space, your own life. I wouldn't presume. What if I don't want my own space? Elena set down the folder, her heart racing. What if what I want is more complicated than simple safety? Elena. Lucien's voice held a warning. Don't make decisions based on gratitude or proximity. You've been through trauma, been forced into my world. That's not a foundation for what? For trusting someone who's kept every promise? For respecting someone who fights for what he values? For developing feelings for someone who sees me as capable instead of breakable? Elena moved closer. You told me you care about me. Did you mean it? Yes. The admission was raw, honest. But that doesn't mean... It means everything, Elena interrupted. Adrian made me feel chosen, but he never made me feel strong. He put me on a pedestal and then resented me for not being perfect. You've treated me like an equal from the beginning, even when I was terrified and helpless. You were never helpless. I felt helpless. Until you showed me I had choices, had power, had worth beyond what someone else assigned to me. Elena reached for his hand. I'm not choosing you out of gratitude or trauma or fear. I'm choosing you because you've earned my trust and respect, because you've shown me what partnership actually looks like. Lucien's fingers closed around hers, his touch warm and careful. My world is dangerous, Elena. It will always be dangerous. I can't promise you normal or peaceful. I don't want normal. Normal gave me Adrian and lies and betrayal. Elena squeezed his hand. I want honest, even if honest means complicated and dangerous. I want someone who fights for what matters, who protects what he values, who keeps his word no matter the cost. You deserve better than a life in the shadows. I deserve a life where I'm seen and valued and protected, where my daughter grows up knowing what real strength looks like. Elena moved closer still. You've given us that, Lucian, not through promises or pretty words, but through action. That's worth more than all the conventional safety in the world. Lucian raised his free hand, finally allowing himself to cup her face the way he'd almost done before. If we do this, if you choose this, there's no going back. People will judge you for staying with someone like me. Let them judge. I've spent too long caring what people think. Elena leaned into his touch. I'm choosing what's real over what looks right. I'm choosing you. The kiss, when it finally came, felt like the resolution of weeks of tension, danger, and unspoken connection. Lucian kissed her with the same controlled intensity he brought to everything, careful and thorough and absolutely present. Elena let herself sink into it, into him, into the acknowledgement that safety sometimes came from unexpected sources. When they finally pulled apart, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. I can't promise you easy. I don't want easy. I want real. Then we'll figure this out together, one day at a time, building something that belongs to us. Lucian pulled back slightly, his thumb brushing across her cheek. But I need you to understand, if you stay, if we do this, I'll protect you and Sophia with everything I have. That's not romantic hyperbole. That's a vow. I know, Elena smiled. That's why I'm staying. The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe in a new atmosphere. Elena had expected awkwardness, uncertainty, the stumbling adjustment of two people trying to build something from unconventional foundations. Instead, she found a surprising ease in the way her life with Lucian began to take shape. He moved her and Sophia into the master wing of the mansion, into rooms that connected to his own, but maintained her independence. The nursery was expanded, filled with everything Sophia could need and decorated in soft creams and pale greens that made the space feel peaceful despite the armed guards who still patrolled the hallways. Elena had her own sitting room, her own office space, where she could work on the online courses she'd started taking in business management, her own bathroom that was larger than her entire previous apartment. But what surprised her most was how naturally Lucian fit into the rhythms of caring for Sophia. He'd hold her during Elena's evening showers, walking the hallways with the baby against his shoulder, speaking to her in Italian while she gazed up at him with wide, trusting eyes. He learned her feeding schedule, her sleep patterns, the specific bounce and sway combination that soothed her when she was fussy. "You're good with her," Elena said one evening, watching him change Sophia's diaper with practiced efficiency. "I helped raise my niece before she died. Some skills you don't forget." Lucien's voice was quiet, touched with old grief. "Juliana was about Sophia's age when I first held her. She used to grab my finger and refused to let go." Elena moved to stand beside him, placing her hand on his arm. "Tell me about her." So he did. In the quiet of the nursery, with Sophia clean and content in his arms, Lucien spoke about the sister who had raised him after their mother died, about the niece who had called him Uncle Luke and demanded he read her the same bedtime story every single night. He spoke about the explosion that had taken them both, about the 3 years he'd spent methodically destroying the organization responsible, about the vow he'd made over their graves to never let innocents be used as weapons again. "That's why you protected us," Elena said softly. "Not just because of Adrian or strategy, but because of them." "Partly. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about honoring their memory and started being about you, about Sophia." Lucien looked down at the baby in his arms. "About wanting to give this little girl the chance Juliana never got." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one." Lucien transferred Sophia to her arms carefully. "You both chose to stay when you could have run. That's trust I'll never take for granted." The domestic moments were interspersed with reminders of Lucien's actual life and work. Elena would be reading to Sophia in the library when armed men would arrive for meetings, speaking in low voices about territories and operations and deals she didn't ask about. She'd be having coffee with Sophia when Lucien would take calls that clearly involved threats and negotiations and the kind of business that happened in shadows. But he never hid it from her. When she asked what was happening, he answered honestly, explaining the complexities of his world without romanticizing or minimizing the darkness. He ran legitimate businesses, property development, import-export operations, consulting firms, but those businesses were layered over less legitimate ventures that he was slowly, carefully transitioning away from. "I'm not trying to become a saint," he told her one night after she'd asked about his long-term plans, "but I'm trying to build something that won't get Sophia killed when she's old enough to ask questions about what I do." "Can you really change? This is your world, your empire." "Empires can be reformed. I've already started shifting assets, restructuring operations, cutting ties with the more violent aspects of the business." Lucien pulled up financial projections on his laptop. "In 5 years, maybe 10, the Moretti organization will be completely legitimate. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen." "Why?" Elena moved to sit beside him. "You have power, money, control. Why give that up?" "Because I want Sophia to be proud of me when she's old enough to understand who I am. Because I want you to be able to hold your head high when people ask what your partner does." Lucien closed the laptop. "Because the violence that used to feel necessary now feels empty. I'm 42 years old, Elena. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of measuring success in fear and intimidation. I want to build something that lasts without requiring constant bloodshed." Elena understood then that staying with her had changed him as much as staying with him had changed her. They were shaping each other, creating something new from their broken pieces. 3 months after Adrian disappeared into witness protection, Elena's divorce was finalized. She stood in the same courthouse where everything had started, this time with Lucien beside her and Natasha watching Sophia in the hallway. Judge Morrison, who remembered the chaos of that first hearing, signed the papers with visible relief. "Ms. Marquez, I hope your future is significantly calmer than your recent past." The judge's smile was genuine. I'm learning to appreciate a different kind of stability, Your Honor. Elena glanced at Lucien, who stood slightly behind her, respectful of her moment. But yes, I think things are finally settling. Outside the courthouse, Elena stood on the steps where she'd been escorted into Lucien's custody months ago. The November air was crisp, carrying the promise of winter, and everything looked different in the afternoon light. She was different, stronger, more certain of herself, more aware of her own worth. "How does it feel?" Lucien asked. "Being officially free?" "Honestly, I feel like I've been free for months. The paperwork was just catching up to reality." Elena turned to face him. "I stopped being Adrian's wife the moment I chose to stay with you." Lucien reached for her hand, his touch warm despite the cold air. "And now? What do you want now?" Elena had been thinking about this question for weeks, turning it over in quiet moments when Sophia slept and Lucien was handling business. She'd considered all the options he'd given her, all the possible futures she could build, and she kept coming back to the same answer. "I want partnership, real partnership, where we build something together." She squeezed his hand. "I want to help you transition your businesses into something legitimate. I want to use the degree I'm working toward to actually contribute, to be more than just the woman you protect." "You're already more than that." "I know, but I want to prove it, to myself and everyone else. I want to turn the Moretti organization into something Sophia can inherit without shame." Elena's voice strengthened. "I want to create foundations that help women like I was. Women trapped in bad marriages, women with children and no resources, women who need protection and opportunities." Lucien's expression shifted into something like awe. "You've been planning this." "I've been thinking about how to take something dark and transform it into light. You saved me, Lucien. I want to save others." Elena pulled him closer. "But I can't do it alone. I need your resources, your connections, your understanding of how power actually works in this city." "Then we'll do it together." Lucien lifted her hand to his lips. "But first, there's something I need to do." He led her to where Natasha waited with Sophia. The baby was awake and alert, her eyes bright as she recognized her mother. Lucien took her carefully from Natasha, cradling her with the competence that had become second nature. "Sophia Marquez," he said seriously, addressing the baby like she could understand every word. "Your mother has given me permission to be part of your life, to help raise you, to protect you as if you were my own. But I want you to know something important. You already have a mother who is the bravest, strongest woman I've ever known. I'm not trying to replace anyone or claim something that isn't mine. I'm just asking for the privilege of being here, of watching you grow, of being someone you can count on." Elena felt tears spill over. Sophia reached up and grabbed Lucien's finger, holding tight with the surprising strength of infant hands. "I think that's a yes," Elena managed through her tears. Lucien looked at her over Sophia's head. "There's one more thing. I've spoken with my lawyers about adoption procedures. If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to legally adopt Sophia. Not to erase her biological father, but to establish permanent parental rights and responsibilities. To make official what's already true, that I'm committed to her, to raising her, to being her father in every way that matters." Elena's breath caught. "You want to adopt her?" "I want to give her my name, my protection, my inheritance. I want her to never question whether she belongs or whether she's safe. I want her to grow up knowing she has a father who chose her, who wanted her, who will fight for her until his last breath." Lucien's voice was fierce with conviction. "But only if that's what you want. She's your daughter, Elena. This has to be your decision." Elena looked at Sophia, at this perfect child who had come into the world surrounded by chaos and betrayal. She thought about Adrian, who had signed away his rights without hesitation. She thought about Lucien, who had fought a war to keep them safe, who had changed his entire life's trajectory because they mattered to him. Yes, the answer was absolute. "Yes, I want you to adopt her. I want her to have your name and your protection. I want her to grow up knowing what real fatherhood looks like." Lucien's arms tightened around Sophia. "Then we'll start the paperwork tomorrow." The adoption process took 4 months. 4 months of home studies and background checks and interviews designed to ensure Sophia's well-being. Elena had worried about Lucien's past, about the questions that might arise about his business dealings. But his lawyers were exceptional, and the narrative they presented was carefully crafted. A successful businessman who had taken in his partner and her infant daughter during a crisis, who had protected them from her dangerous ex-husband, who had proven his commitment through months of dedicated parenting. The judge who approved the adoption was different from Judge Morrison, but she smiled warmly as she signed the final papers. "Mr. Moretti, Miss Marquez, it's clear that Sophia is loved and well cared for. I'm pleased to grant this adoption. Congratulations on your family." Sophia was officially Sophia Marquez Moretti as of that afternoon. Elena held her daughter while Lucien signed the final documents, watched him write his name on papers that made him legally responsible for this child who had grabbed his heart the same way she'd grabbed his finger. "She's ours now," Elena whispered. "Really, truly ours." She always was. Lucien pressed a kiss to Sophia's forehead, then to Elena's. The paperwork just makes it official. That night, they celebrated quietly in the mansion. Sophia had prepared a special dinner, and Lucien's most trusted associates came to offer their congratulations. Elena watched as hardened criminals cooed over her daughter, as men who trafficked in violence and intimidation became gentle and soft-spoken in the presence of this small child, who represented something innocent and hopeful. "She's changing them," Elena told Lucien as they stood together watching Sophia sleep in her crib later that night. "Just like she changed you." Children have a way of putting everything in perspective. Lucien wrapped his arms around Elena from behind. "When I look at her, I see all the reasons why my old life has to end. I can't be the man I was and be the father she needs." "So who are you becoming?" "Someone better. Someone worthy of you both." Lucien turned her to face him. "Elena, there's one more thing I want to ask you. One more commitment I want to make." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that took Elena's breath away. It wasn't ostentatious or flashy, just a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the nursery's soft light. "I know we're building something unconventional. I know we came together through circumstances neither of us would have chosen. I know that by traditional standards, this relationship is too new, too complicated, too rooted in crisis to be making permanent decisions." Lucien took her hand. "But I also know that I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're my partner, my equal, the person who makes me want to be better than I am. I love you, Elena. I love Sophia. I love the life we're building together. So I'm asking, will you marry me?" Elena looked at the ring, at this man who had transformed from captor to protector to partner, at the life they'd built from impossible circumstances. She thought about all the reasons she should say no, all the practical concerns about timing and propriety and what people would say. Then she thought about Adrian, who had promised her everything and delivered nothing. And she thought about Lucien, who had promised her protection and delivered love. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, like it had been made for her. Lucien pulled her close, kissing her with the passionate intensity he usually kept carefully controlled. And in her crib, Sophia slept peacefully, oblivious to the fact that her family had just become permanent. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony on the estate grounds. Spring had transformed the gardens into something magical, and Elena walked down an aisle lined with white roses wearing a simple dress that made her feel beautiful without trying to be someone she wasn't. Sophia, now 10 months old and beginning to pull herself up on furniture, was held by Sophia in the front row, her gurgling laughter punctuating the ceremony at perfect moments. Lucien's vows were simple but absolute. "I promise to protect you, to partner with you, to respect your strength while supporting your vulnerabilities. I promise to be the father Sophia deserves and the husband you need. I promise to build a life with you that honors both the darkness we came from and the light we're creating together." Elena's vows were equally direct. "I promise to trust you with my heart and Sophia's future. I promise to be your partner in transforming what was into what could be. I promise to see you for who you are, not the man people fear, but the man who fights for what he loves. I promise to build something beautiful with you from the ashes of what we survived." When the officiant pronounced them married, the handful of guests, Sophia, Natasha, and a few of Lucien's most trusted associates, applauded. But Elena barely heard them. She was too focused on the man in front of her, this dangerous, complicated, absolutely devoted man who had somehow become her everything. The reception was intimate. held in the mansion's grand dining room with music and food and the kind of joy that comes from surviving impossible odds. Elena danced with her husband while Sophia watched from Sophia's arms, clapping her small hands in delight. "Happy?" Lucien murmured against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Elena leaned into him. "A year ago, I was trying to divorce a man who betrayed me. Now I'm married to a man who transformed his entire life to be worthy of mine." "You transformed my life just by being in it." Lucien spun her gently. "Everything changed the day you walked into that courthouse carrying Sophia. Everything changed when you chose to protect us instead of using us. Best decision I ever made." The year that followed was one of systematic transformation. Lucien began the careful process of legitimizing his operations, divesting from anything that couldn't survive legal scrutiny. He established the Moretti Foundation with Elena as co-director, focusing on supporting women and children escaping domestic violence in dangerous situations. The foundation provided housing, legal assistance, job training, and protection, everything Elena had needed when she'd been trapped with Adrian. Elena threw herself into the work with fierce dedication. She completed her business degree, then started a master's program in nonprofit management. She spoke at fundraisers, gave interviews about their mission, became the public face of an organization that quietly changed lives while operating under the protection of Lucien's resources and connections. Sophia grew from infant to toddler, learning to walk and then run through the mansion's hallways, calling Lucien Papa, with the absolute certainty that came from knowing he was hers. She had his eyes, Elena realized one day, not biologically, but in expression, in the way she assessed situations with careful intelligence before acting. The divorce papers that had never been signed in that first courthouse visit finally became irrelevant. Adrian Russo was somewhere in witness protection, living under a new name, completely erased from their lives. Occasionally, Elena would see news about the Volkov organization's complete dismantling, about sentences handed down to its former leaders, about the power vacuum that had been carefully filled by less violent organizations under Lucien's subtle influence. The city had changed. Lucien had changed it, shifting the balance of power towards something more stable and less brutal. He still commanded respect and fear, but now it was the respect that came from legitimate power and the fear of disappointing someone whose trust you valued. "You're becoming respectable," Elena teased him one evening after a particularly successful foundation gala where business leaders and politicians had courted his favor. "Don't spread that rumor. I have a reputation to maintain." But Lucien smiled as he said it, pulling her close. "Though I suppose there are worse things than being known as the reformed criminal who actually keeps his promises." "You're not reformed. You're evolved," Elena corrected. "Reformed implies you were broken. You were never broken, just operating in a system that required darkness. Now you're creating a new system." "We're creating it. None of this works without you." Lucien gestured to the foundation reports on his desk, the strategic plans for transitioning his remaining questionable operations, the educational initiatives they were funding. "You're the vision, Elena. I'm just the muscle that makes it happen." "We're partners," Elena insisted. "Equal partners building something that matters." On Sophia's second birthday, they held a party in the mansion gardens with children from the foundation's programs and their families. Elena watched Lucien help Sophia blow out her candles, watched him scoop her up when she got overwhelmed by the attention, watched him be the father neither of them had expected, but both desperately needed. Later, after the guests had left and Sophia was asleep, Elena and Lucien stood on the balcony overlooking the estate grounds. The property that had once been a fortress was slowly becoming a home, the security still present but less oppressive, the atmosphere shifting from siege mentality to peaceful sanctuary. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucien asked quietly. "Choosing this life instead of disappearing and starting fresh?" Elena considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I wonder what the alternative would have been like. A quiet life somewhere far from here, raising Sophia away from everything complicated and dangerous." She turned to face him. "But then I think about what we've built, about the women we've helped, about the family we've become. And I realize that running away would have meant living small, playing it safe, never knowing what we could accomplish together. We could still go, walk away from all of this, find somewhere peaceful." "Could you? Really?" Elena challenged. Could you leave behind the organization you're transforming, the people who depend on you, the city you're trying to heal? Lucien was quiet for a moment. No, I couldn't. This is who I am, what I'm meant to do. And I'm meant to do it with you, not despite the complications, but because of them. Because easy doesn't change anything, and we're changing everything. Elena took his hand. I don't regret choosing you, Lucien, not for a single second. Every difficult moment, every scary decision, every time I wondered if I was making a mistake, it all led here. To us. To this life. To something bigger than either of us could have built alone. I love you. The words were simple but weighted with everything they meant. Gratitude, devotion, partnership, trust earned through fire. I love you too. Elena leaned into him. Thank you for keeping your promises, all of them. Thank you for believing I could be better than I was, for seeing who I could become and demanding I reach for it. They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other in the worst circumstances and built something remarkable from the wreckage. Behind them, the mansion glowed with warm light, a home built on foundations of violence that was slowly being transformed into something that offered hope instead of fear. Inside, Sophia slept peacefully, her room monitored by security, but her dreams untouched by the darkness that had brought her parents together. She would grow up knowing she was loved, protected, valued. She would grow up with a mother who had fought for her and a father who had chosen her. She would grow up understanding that strength meant protecting the vulnerable and power meant using resources to lift others up. The courthouse where it had all begun was across the city, still processing divorces and endings. But here, on this estate that had transformed from prison to sanctuary to home, Elena and Lucien were living proof that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best outcomes. That sometimes protection could evolve into partnership, survival could transform into thriving, and broken people could heal each other through commitment and choice. Adrian Russo had filed for divorce expecting to erase his mistakes and start fresh. Instead, he'd set in motion events that gave Elena something infinitely more valuable than the fairy tale she'd once believed in. He'd given her the chance to discover her own strength, to find a partner who saw her as an equal, to build a life that mattered. The divorce papers finally signed months ago sat in a file somewhere, legal proof that one chapter had ended. But they were just papers, just documentation of something Elena had known much earlier, that she'd stopped being Adrian's wife the moment she chose to stay with Lucien. She was Elena Marquez Moretti now, mother to Sophia, partner to Lucien, co-director of a foundation that changed lives, builder of something new and fierce and uncompromising in its commitment to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. She was stronger than the woman who had walked into that courthouse carrying a 3-month-old and hoping for freedom. She had found freedom, but not in the way she'd expected, not through escape, but through standing her ground, not through running from danger, but through partnering with the most dangerous man she knew and demanding he become something better. Come to bed, Lucien said softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. Tomorrow, we have foundation meetings and the final transition documents to review. Tonight, let's just be us. Just us sounds perfect. Elena let him lead her inside, through hallways that had witnessed so much transformation, past rooms where security teams planned and operated, up to their private wing where Sophia slept and their life together waited. Sometimes the darkest battles really did forge the strongest bonds. Sometimes protection evolved into partnership. Sometimes the man who saved you became the man you built an empire with. And sometimes the woman who walked into a courthouse expecting an ending found a beginning instead. A beginning that honored her strength, valued her voice, and proved that love wasn't about fairy tales or perfect circumstances. It was about choosing each other every single day and building something worth protecting together. Elena had made her choice in that courthouse when armed men burst in and changed everything. She'd made it again when she stayed instead of running. She made it every morning when she woke up beside Lucien, and every evening when they reviewed foundation progress, and every moment when she looked at Sophia and saw their future reflected in her daughter's eyes. She chose partnership over safety, complicated over simple, real over perfect. And in choosing, she had found something more valuable than the life she'd imagined when she first filed for divorce. She'd found home.